Hi, everyone. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. Let's get started. This week, week 5, you'll be working on the Holocaust and the world must know. This is the largest part of the book, and this is also the hardest part of the book. And the hardest part of the course is almost over, at least in the overview of everything. I think this part hits you the hardest, although we'll be watching films that will also tear your guts out, but I think you'll be aware of the type of problems we see in the Holocaust from this overview. Excuse me. How are you going to cope with this difficult part? Don't dwell on little things. Look for the steps. Look for the systemic nature that the Nazis had and used to torture and kill Jews. Look for those large patterns rather than dwelling on the small stuff. There'll be a lot of little anecdotes that I said will rip your gut out, but try not to dwell on those. Look for the patterns, and then after you look for the patterns, look for examples for the large patterns. Those are important to remember. And that's the smaller stuff, but it's not real small. For example, if you're talking about exporting the Jews from the ghetto to the concentration camp, you might want to remember some of the people who risked their lives for children or committed suicide rather than sending people. You can write the large pattern and give one example, but don't dwell on it. Don't try to look at it as objectively as you can. What we're discussing in this section is really genocide, which is the deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. Now, genocide's been happening before and after the Holocaust, but the term wasn't coined until the Holocaust. And the key to determining whether something is a genocide is that they deliberately are killing large group of people. They didn't incidentally kill them. For example, Christopher Columbus came over and his men contracted smallpox, or brought smallpox to the brought syphilis to the people, and the people died. That was accidental. Later, although there was deliberate killing of the native populations by settlers in North America, taking blankets and rubbing them with the smallpox virus and giving them to the Indians. Those were deliberate acts that killed large groups of people of a particular ethnic group. So it has to be deliberate, okay? As I said, it could before and after, and it has to be deliberate, and it's on an ethnic group. There are current genocides, and you can look up Genocide Watch in Google, and you'll go to the site. And you can find that these nations are where current genocides are occurring or about to occur. There's, I think, 10 steps to a genocide that they've defined. And some of these are at different levels. Haven't totally gone over into genocide, but they're really close. In Syria, the country's killing its own people. In Iraq, they're after the Kurds. In the Sudan, they're after different ethnic groups there, as well as Somalia. In Myanmar, they're ousting Muslims. The Central African Republic is just a mess, and the same in Nigeria. So these are things that are going on right now. So genocide isn't over. The Holocaust wasn't the one and only. Even though I'm mentioning all these other ones, none were as systematic as the Holocaust or mechanized. the Holocaust used IBM counters to keep track of how many Jews, so that they could systemically make sure they had lists of all of them, so they could be sure to get all of the Jews. Okay, so it was mechanized. It was systemic. It was systemic because of the Nazis' indoctrination of population against the Jews, telling them they were vermin, they were rats, they didn't deserve to live. There was the stripping of civil rights and then property. This was a systematic way to demean them and make them not citizens. There were random acts of violence. They had to jump off the sidewalks when they saw a Nazi coming, but if the Nazis thought it wasn't fast enough, bang, you're dead. Okay, I mean, those were the types of things that went on. The Nazis could stop you and ask you to scrub streets, and if they didn't like the way you were doing it, bang, bang. I don't mean to make this trivial. It was horrible. Can you imagine driving your car down a major road in your city? Like for me, it might be down Tittabawassee or State Street, and being pulled over because you're a Jew, and bang, you're dead. And I'm sure you know the struggles against, or struggles of African American men who are just stereotyped as to being violent, and their history of being pulled over. I can't imagine living in that much fear when I drive down the road, when I walk down the street, when I go to a store, that I could be kicked out because of who I am. And these acts were random. You never knew. They might not bother you one day, but you do the same thing the next and you're dead. The ghettos were systematic, and it was systemic. People knew about the ghettos. They lived outside them. They heard the cries for bread. They had to walk. In fact, through one ghetto, they had to walk through it. There was a sidewalk through it for people to get through, and they saw into the ghetto what was going on. Not all the ghettos had large walls to keep people from knowing what was in there. And that was a way to force them all together, not to give them enough food, to starve them, to let diseases run rampant, so maybe they would kill themselves off, and those that didn't and had hardy constitutions were shipped to the concentration camps, and you know what happened there. And I do want to emphasize, ordinary Germans did know what was going on. They did. They turned a blind eye. And as Wiesel said, indifference, that was the problem. That's what killed so many Jews. Ordinary German citizens didn't stand up either because they believed the indoctrination or that they were too afraid to do anything. Of course, in future weeks, you'll learn about people who wish to help the Jews. Coping with the reading, as I said before, look for the large patterns. Take frequent breaks. Hug your significant other, your cat, your dog, your gerbil, anything that you love. You can hug your bird. I don't know if they like it. Did you see that peacock that they tried to take through and put on an airplane, calling it a support animal? The peacock was hugging the person, so I guess you can. Okay, just some lightheartedness into this horrible, horrible event that we're dealing with. Take a walk, do some physical activity. When I read it, I end up with a pretty clean house because I keep stopping and doing some housework that needs to be done and then get back to it. So I have a really clean house because I can't walk. In the fall, when I read it, I do a walk. Let's do the discussion, the log, and the quiz. You've been doing well on these, so I don't really have anything to say. Please be sure to, with the discussion, do both parts. Your reply and the posts. They're worth 10 points, and there's 10 or 11 discussion boards, and that's 111. If you only do the first post, you're going to end up with, let's say we have 10 boards, you're only going to end up with 50 points out of 100, and that is enough. So you must respond. The log is due. It's not the same as the first log on this book. The log for the Nazi assault was different. I'm asking you to look at different things for this log. And then, of course, there's a quiz, true, false. If you've read it, chances are you'll do just fine with it. I do want to tell you, I'm coming down with something. I don't know what it's going to turn into. I will respond to your messages, but I may be very slow to respond, and I usually get back to you within 36 hours. If I don't, please don't think I'm ignoring you. It probably has to do with this cold I'm fighting. I have lupus, and when I get a cold, I really have to rest, or else the lupus will flare, and then I'm in the hospital. Okay, so I may be a little slow, but I will answer your questions. Don't let that deter you from sending me questions, okay? Have a good week. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with this week's work.